So here's the trout survey data I have from Dane County, Wisconsin. I previously did a YouTube video where I tried fishing every trout stream in Dane County, Wisconsin, and seeing if I could catch a trout from it. And I caught a trout from like 23 of the 27 streams. I think I caught fish from all but maybe one of the streams that's included in these surveys, which I didn't try fishing because it's not really considered a trout stream, although it's a tributary to Black Earth Creek, which there's been surveys done on. So there's definitely trout in it. But here's the first stream is Vermont Creek. It flows into Black Earth Creek around by Black Earth and goes along State Highway 78. In the surveys, they've only found brown trout in it. It didn't have a super high density of brown trout, but it definitely had some brown trout. When I fished, I think I fished it twice before, and the first time we fished it when I was younger, we didn't catch anything, and the last time I fished it, I think I caught like two 9 or 10 inch browns. I didn't do great, but I caught some. There's some decent sized fish, but not a lot, except in the one survey where they found caught a few big fish, but it has fish in it. It's worth trying fishing. It doesn't have super high numbers, but it definitely has brown trout. The next stream is West Branch Sugar River. I also fished this in the Dane County Trout Fishing Challenge. I caught some brown trout from it. I think I caught a couple of them. There's a few brook trout in it. I think those surveys are from the upper stretch of it. Some of the surveys have caught a lot of brown trout. The size is all right in it. There's a few larger fish, but not a lot of larger fish. But it's a trout stream, and I think there is quite a bit of eased land around it, if I remember right, because when I fished it, there was quite a bit of public land to fish on it. Also on Vermont Creek, there's a few chunks of public land too to fish. Next creek is Moen Creek. This stream has some brook trout, some brown trout. I have done fairly well fishing this creek, actually. These surveys don't have show that there's that good a quality of trout, but I've caught some nice fish out of there. And these surveys have caught a few larger fish. I usually catch more browns than brook trout out of here, but these surveys say that they've caught some brook trout out of there here too. These surveys are getting old, so this data may not be exactive today, but it's probably similar to how it is now. The next trout stream is Sugar River. When I fished this in the Dane County Trout Fishing Challenge, I did not catch any trout from it. I think I only caught like a horny head chub and a couple creek chubs. The one survey in here caught a fair number of brown trout and some decent sized ones, but overall there's not a lot of trout in this stream. I could have tried fishing this at a different time to see if I would have caught anything. I don't think this is the best stream to fish, but there's definitely some trout in there. Some people might disagree with my review of the stream in the video. I think there's a chunk of public land right by where Epic is you can fish. I'm not sure where other chunks of public are because that's where I tried fishing. But that's it what I have to say about Sugar River. I know a lot of people go like tubing down it, so I know it gives a fair amount of use. The next creek is Syftestad Creek. I remember wading this creek. This creek was pretty small, and there was one or two chunks of either eased or public land on it. I think when I fished it, I caught like a brook trout and a brown trout. I don't think they were particularly large or anything, but it looks like there's more brown trout than brook trout in this stream. But It's not a very large stream, if I recall, as I recall. And there's not a lot of area to fish, so I'd probably suggest fishing it earlier in the year. Next creek is Story Creek. This is kind of away from some of the other streams in Dane County. Most of the streams are on the western part of Dane County. This one's like in the south central part of Dane County, and it flows into Greene County. This stream has a lot of brook trout per square mile and quite a few brown trout, also some pretty large brown trout. When I fished, I think I caught two browns and a brook trout, although I fished it when the water was pretty cold. There's also quite a few larger, good-sized brook trout too, like 10, 12 inches, which are pretty good sized on these surveys. Not really that big, but as these streams go, that's decent sized. And also a lot of streams in Dane County don't have a lot of brook trout. So there's a pretty big wildlife area to fish on this stream by Brooklyn, which I fish, and it's had quite a few nice deep holes to fish I think too, and shallow areas and run riffles too. So the habitat on it looked really good. The next creek is Ryan Creek. This flows into Elvers Creek and forms East Branch of Mounds Creek. It has a lot of brown trout in it, not very many large brown trout. And when I fished it, I caught some brown trout. And there is not, as far as I know, there's not much for public land on that creek to fish. And it's pretty brushy. Next stream is Pleasant Valley Creek. I think this flows into Kittleson Valley Creek. When I fished this was really clear, but it had some decent sized holes. I caught some brown trout out of it. When you looked in the pools, there was a whole bunch of brown trout swimming around. And these surveys show that there's a lot of brown trout in it. And a lot of them up to medium size, like 15 or 16 inches. And I think I do recall seeing quite a few decent sized fish in it when I fished it too. Although I don't recall how large a trout I caught when I fished it. I'd have to go back and watch the video. I don't think there were anything to write home about though. And there's some chunks of eased and public land on this stream too. Next stream is Primrose Branch. This stream I do not recall where it is at, to be honest. I think this might flow into the Sugar River, but I could be completely wrong. I probably should have done prep before this video. This stream has quite a few trout in it per mile, and quite a few decent sized fish, 2 per mile. And there's nothing huge, but some decent sized fish. It has a lot more brown trout than brook trout. I think I caught, when I fished this stream, I think I caught like a brown or brookie or 2 on it. But when I was trying to fish all these creeks, I was trying to just fish one area and fish like 4 creeks in a day. So I didn't really fish any of these streams super hard when I was doing the trout fishing challenge, trying different streams. And there is a few chunks of eased land along this stream, if this is the right stream that I'm thinking about. This stream would be definitely one worth trying because it has quite a few trout in it. Next stream I have is German Valley Branch. And when I fished this, I think I caught 2 browns and a brook trout. I lost some really nice sized brown trout when I was fishing this stream. The surveys on the stream says it doesn't have a lot of brown trout and there's a lot more brook trout than brown trout. But when I fished it, I think it was mostly just having brown trout come up after my lures. But that doesn't mean anything if they're hitting at your lures. And it was probably all time dependent of when I was fishing it. But there's some eased land or public land around along that too. I think there's just like more like easements. Next stream is Kittleson Valley Creek. This is a pretty popular creek to fish. It's it's larger than a lot of these other streams I was talking about. It doesn't have any brook trout. I don't even know why I included brook trout in this slide. It has quite a few brown trout, a lot of small to medium sized brown trout, which is, if you watch the last couple ones of these videos, is normal for these streams. The largest ones they caught were like 16 inches. But there was definitely quite a few fish swimming around in it. And on this stream too, I think there's easement land and some state land too you can fish on. There's quite a bit of public fishing on this stream. Next stream is Moen Creek. Right now I'm not recalling where this creek was. This a creek that flows into Elvers Creek? This might have been a little tiny creek that flows into Elvers Creek. And I think I caught a brown trout or two when I fished this stream too. This stream only had brown trout in it, mostly small fish, but it's also a pretty small stream, so that doesn't surprise me that it only has small fish in it. This creek is probably the second most popular stream in Dane County. It is not that far outside of Verona. It has it only has brown trout in it, although there could be some brook trout in the upstream tributaries. When I fished it, I caught some brown trout. I don't think they were large brown trout. The stream has some decent sized brown trout in it though. So I'm sure if you fish it enough, you'll probably eventually catch some larger brown trout after you catch a lot of smaller ones. The number of brown trout per mile in the stream is very high, which is a good thing. And there's quite a few like 12 to 16 inch fish per mile too, compared to some of these other streams. And even trout over 16 inches per mile, there's a decent amount of. And there's a pretty good amount of public fishery areas along this stream too. The next creek is Garfoot Creek. This creek is small. I think there's only a few small public fishery areas on it. It has brook and brown trout in it. The number of fish is not super high, but it's also a small creek. There's also a few rainbow trout that were in it that were probably stocked in Black Earth Creek and swam up there. There's nothing special about this, what they found in this stream, other than they caught a large brown trout out of it. Next stream is Fry's Feeder. When I fished this creek, I'm pretty sure I just caught one brook trout. All they also found brown trout in the stream. This flows into Mount Vernon Creek, so it should have similar fish species as Mount Vernon Creek. My guess is if they've surveyed it more recently, there's probably fewer brook trout and more brown trout in it, but I could be completely wrong. Brown trout tend to do better in these streams than brook trout, although brook trout are the only native trout to these streams. And if you look through all this data, it's pretty obvious that brown trout are a lot more abundant in these streams than brook trout. But this is a small stream. Like the lower 300 yards of it was public area, and there's a really pretty rock formation by it. And there was the holes are pretty deep there, but I think above the bridge there, it's pretty shallow. I don't think there's any more public land. The next stream is the most popular trout stream in Dane County. It's Black Earth Creek. The surveys in the lower parts of the stream only had like 200 or 300 brown trout per mile, but the surveys around Cross Plains, which are the ones where there's more fish, had a higher number of trout per mile. I just think the lower part of the stream starts to warm up, so there's not as many trout in it, but I could be completely wrong about that. But there are some larger fish in the stream. The number of larger fish is not extremely high, but there's definitely some bigger fish. I know people catch some larger fish out of it. And there's also some rainbow trout in the stream that are stocked. Here are some more surveys from Black Earth Creek, and they continue to show that it has brown trout mostly, and a few rainbow trout, which the rainbow trout I don't think reproduce. And they've caught some pretty large trout too, a few larger trout in these surveys. The next stream is Bohn Creek. Maybe this creek I think also flowed into Elvers Creek, and I think it's by Tyrrell Basin. And this stream has some brook trout and brown trout in it. There's quite a few decent brook trout and some decent sized one, and there's a few brown trout, but this stream has more brookies than browns, which is unusual for this county. But I think when I fished this, I caught a brookie and a brown. Another stream is Brewery Creek. This stream is in Cross Plains, and it has brown trout in it. And it's a really small creek that just flows through Cross Plains and starts just outside of Cross Plains. And they must have done this survey when it was hot because there was a lot of larger fish in it, or there was a deep hole. This stream I did not catch any trout from when I fished. It's Deer Creek. There's a public area right by where it flows into where this Deer Creek and Fry's Feeder joins to form Mount Vernon Creek. When I fished it, I didn't catch anything. It was really brushy. There's some brook and brown trout in it which were caught in these surveys, and I saw some trout in it when I fished it, but I wasn't able to get them to bite. If I would have been able to use worms when I fished it, I probably would have caught something. But that's how it goes trying to fish all these new streams. Okay, another stream is East Branch Blue Mounds Creek. I fished this stream a few times. I caught some brown trout from it. I don't know how. I think the larger ones I caught were from West Branch Blue Mounds Creek, not East Branch Blue Mounds Creek. But there's like one or two areas of public land along it to fish. I think a fair long stretch of it was straightened out though. A lot of the land along this stream is private. And it has a lot of small to medium sized browns and a few larger brown trout in it. Elvers Creek flows into East Branch Blue Mounds Creek. That is it, where Elvers Creek and Ryan Creek join together is where East Branch Blue Mounds Creek starts. And in Elvers Creek, there is a lot of brown trout that are small or medium sized, and there's a few larger brown trout. When I fish it, I've caught a lot of trout, but I haven't caught many big trout. And I think the fish are a little on the thin side too because there's so many of them. There's a fair amount of public area along this creek too to fish also. And here's the source.